KTU Cares, a salute to local heroes.
What kind of world do you want? Think anything. History starts now.
On KTU Cares, good morning. How's it going? Bartel in the KTU studios, bringing in two great guests, and we're actually going to have a total of four this morning, one of which will be Connecticut State Representative Fred Camilo joining us, and also Senator Richard Blumenthal from the great state of Connecticut joining us a little bit later on in the program. But for now, in studio with me is Charles Kolin. He's a 16-year-old junior at Greens Farms Academy in Westport, Connecticut. Good morning, Charles.
Good morning.
And Bob Whelan is here. He's headmaster at Greens Farms Academy. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
You got it. Great to have you both here. And I'm going to go to Charles first to tell us a little bit of what we're going to talk about this morning. And the main goal here is inclusion, unity, and anti-bullying. Charles, talk to us a little bit about your story and why we're here this morning, and then we'll hear a little bit from Bob, too.
Sure. So like Bartel said, I'm Charles Kolin. I'm 16 years old. I live in Greenwich, Connecticut. And when I made the move from Westchester over to Fairfield County, it was difficult. I wasn't accepted by my peers. I was bullied for 4 years, from 5th grade to 8th grade. And that was soul-crushing. It was life-changing. And it really hurt. And that led me to want to make sure that nobody feels the pain that I felt throughout that time. And so when I changed schools, finally, after 8th grade, going into 9th grade, I found Greens Farms Academy. This was an environment and a community that accepted me with open arms for who I was, and they believed in me. And with the confidence boost, I was able to go out and try to launch a campaign. So I was browsing online to see what I can do, what organizations I can help out with, and Pacer jumped out at me. I saw their video. It was a very emotional video. It's a video that's on their website, pacer.org, if anyone wants to go and check it out. And it was powerful. It captured my attention, and I immediately knew I needed to give them a call. And after reading about the Unity Day, it fit my ideas and it fit my personal story perfectly. And so after talking with Julie Herzog, the director of Pacer, they gave me the green light to introduce this into my school and to try to make this into a national event. And so I've really taken it from there. And it took a few school meetings at school with different school officials, and we eventually got a day put forth, and it was successful the first year, and we're trying to make this into something even bigger this year, and it expanded from there.
How well spoken is he, Bob? I mean, Charles, that's great. I mean, if I could ask anybody to give me a snapshot of what this show is going to be about for the next half hour, I mean, that was tremendous.
Well, and I sit here and I'm listening to Charles, who at 16 is as comfortable telling his story, but modeling, most importantly, the kinds of values and ideals that inspire educators like me and my colleagues to do the work that we do. We're a coeducational pre-K to 12 independent school in Westport, Connecticut, and our mission talks about engaging students as partners. So when Charles came to me and to some of our colleagues and talked about wanting to do something that to make a difference, for us it was such a natural. What actually inspires me even further, though, is when kids have a sense of agency and they really believe in something, it's almost incalculable what can happen as a result. And Charles, in a really short period of time, began to make a positive difference not only in our community but in surrounding communities, talking about things that fundamentally are everything that great schools and school communities should be about. Ultimately, it was about a sense of belonging, that it was about kindness. And I think it's one of the things that us as adults in 2019, bumping up against some of the delivery systems, Instagram, Snapchat, other things that are different than most of us grew up with. Mm-hmm. It's imperative that we have the kind of leadership from people like Charles. So Charles established something new at our school that's taken on not only a life of its own in our school community, but it's moved on to the national stage. And we couldn't be more proud. It's ultimately when we can step back and have kids lead that I think that we feel a sense of confidence about the future.
So Unity Day was started by Pacer Bullying Prevention Center in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And like I said, with their green light, their blessing, I was able to expand this and sort of Charlesify it in my own little way.
I love it.
So on top of being an anti-bullying day and a day of action against bullying, it's a day where people come together for tolerance, kindness, and respect.
Great.
It's where people appreciate each other's differences, they work alongside them, they recognize them, and they learn that even though you have a difference of opinion, you can still be friends with someone. You can still appreciate someone for who they are, which was something that the bullies, when I was going to school, never could see and never could realize. When I came into the school, there was this set of culture that the bullies created, and I just wasn't able to fit in. I wasn't able to fit in with their visual social media and different trends that they had, and so I was seen as an outcast, and it sort of expanded from there.
Certainly all of our KTU listeners this morning have heard about this, and some of them might be dealing with it. Is there a place where people can go to get more information?
Yes, it would be, for Unity Day, whereas the groundwork would be pacer.org. You can go visit their website. They're really great. Watch one of their videos. They have more than just Unity Day, and it's a great place to get some groundwork information, as well as my own website. If you want to keep up with the Charlesified version of Unity Day, please visit unitychallenge.org. It's my personal website, and you'll find lots of information on my work and information on myself.
Great job, Charles. Now on the line, I'd like to bring in Connecticut State Representative Fred Camilo. And if you wouldn't mind, Charles, give us some of the story with this.
So it all started when I moved from New York to Connecticut. So when I came in 5th grade, I was a new kid, and I immediately had to go into a whole new setting, a whole new group of kids who had their own social culture that I had to get myself into. And it was difficult because I thought differently than them. I didn't have the same enjoyments and likes and characteristics as them. And as a result, I didn't really fit in right. They didn't really understand me. I had an alternate way of thinking. I viewed the world in a different point of view, and as a result, I was seen as an outcast. So from 5th grade to 8th grade, I was bullied. They would say cruel things to me. They would, and it wasn't physical. When you think of bullying, you usually think of physical. You usually think of, oh, he's tripping you in the hallway, he's knocking your books out of your hands, he's shoving you into a locker. But my bullying was emotional, it was verbal, and it was exclusion. It was, they would invite me somewhere, I would show up, and they wouldn't be there. It was, they would take me to a place, tell me to go and do something, and when I turned around, they would be running away, and they had already left. It was in a classroom when no person could see it. It was on the athletic field. It was on certain days it was fine. On other days, I had 15 people come up to me telling me I should go kill myself.
Wow.
And as a result, I had to change my environment. I came into Greens Farms, and it changed my life. After I switched schools, it gave me a tremendous confidence booster. I was able to get my morale up, and I thought that if I could change anything and if I could make a difference, it would be to make sure that my experience doesn't happen to anyone else. And so as a result, I looked on for some anti-bullying campaigns, and I found Pacer. I met with them. I with their blessing, I was able to help promote this and take it off to another level. And that's when the idea of a nationally recognized day came about. And the first person I reached out to was Representative Camilo.
And while you're on the phone with us this morning, thank you again, Representative Camilo, being with us this morning. What was that like for you to hear from Charles?
It's one of those times where people will call and reach out to you a lot, but Charles reached out and had a solution. He was looking for some guidance, and it became clear to me right away that he was a special guy. He was very mature for his age. I could tell you that legislators don't go about things as thoroughly as Charles did. He really crossed his T's and dotted his I's and reached out to legislators across the aisle, both on the state and federal level, did it in a textbook manner where, it became clear that he was going to be very successful, not only in this endeavor, but in anything else he really chooses to do. And we're very, very proud of him. And, the great things are going to come from Charles in his very, very bright future. How
do you feel about the overall concept that Charles is starting with this?
Well, it's very, very important. When I was growing up, which seems like a long time ago, but in the overall scheme of things, it really isn't. Bullying was handled very differently. if there was a bully, and there were, usually it went from taunting and just lots of mental abuse, as Charles was alluding to. But back then, it would also end up being physical, and you at some point somebody would take on that bully, and it would always end. But today, it's a very different world, and that's not really encouraged anymure. But that's how we handled it back then.
Mm-hmm.
But today, it's to me, I prefer that way. But our big difference today is we didn't have social media. And unfortunately, as convenient and as fun as it is, it's a double-edged sword. People really, back then when we were growing up, if somebody was, saying things about you, it was word of mouth. And yes, it was hurtful, but it wasn't for the whole world to see. And that's also really exacerbated a problem, a problem that's been around forever, but it's made it a lot more serious. And we see these horrible stories of children being so devastated by it that they end up harming themselves. And you got to stop it, at its source. And with a positive initiative like Charles, it's to me, it's the way to handle it. And it's something that I think will be a model for people in all 50 states.
I agree. While we still have Connecticut State Representative Camilo on the line for just a minute or two longer, any questions while we have him here from Charles or Bob before I ask State Representative to have some closing words on KTU Cares this morning?
I mean, if you had a way to stop it, what would be your personal way? What would you do to prevent bullying if you had the chance?
Again, I think times have changed. In today's world, I think what Charles is doing is it's a positive. Unity. The word itself is a positive, and it's got a great connotation for people. Everybody likes unity, being unified, and this is something that everybody agrees on. It's a problem. Mm-hmm. It's a serious problem in today's world with the internet, and this is, to me, the way to handle it is by not being negative against those doing it, because again, they have a problem. And I think a lot of the people who are bullies, I think a lot of them, can be reformed. And I've seen that in my own lifetime. So rather than castigate them and turn their tables on them, this is a positive. And what Charles is advocating here, I think is the right way to do it. Again, it's a very different method from when I grew up. Mm-hmm. But certainly I think this is the way to handle it. And it's a positive. And I salute him and support him 100% in his endeavor here.
Any closing words? Fred Camilo is on the line with us, Connecticut State Representative. We have you for another 30 seconds. Closing words this morning. And again, thank you for joining us on KTU Cares.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me on this. I just hope that people really listen to Charles's message and look at how he did this. Look at how he reached out. He didn't take no for an answer. He reached out to people, his own elected representatives, both on a state and federal level, and beyond. He actually went beyond that. He went to other states. And, I met with Charles and his parents, and I know who are very, very proud of him.
Yes.
It's a great, it really inspires me, and it gives me faith that the next generation, we're going to be in fine hands with people like Charles, taking up the helm in the years to come.
Thanks so much. Enjoy your day. And thanks again, Connecticut State Representative Fred Camilo.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
You too. God bless.
And now, as promised, let's bring in Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal on the line with us this morning. Good morning, Senator, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning to you, both to Charles and Bob, and thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here with us early this morning. Senator Blumenthal, quite amazing that we have Charles here in the studio and you on the phone talking about Unity Day and inclusion.
To his great credit, this idea for Unity Day was really Charles's, and he came to my office. I was really delighted to meet with him and his dad, and thought the idea was just absolutely dynamite, and very pleased to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our meeting together. You accepted me with such open arms. You like you said, from when I left. I thought that you thought it was a great idea, and I knew after meeting with you that we could expand this and really push this off to the next level.
And I think the message that it sends, and that you have articulated so well about anti-bullying, the importance of everybody committed to it, protections for anyone who may be vulnerable or at risk of bullying, but also the example, and frankly your example, of courage and strength is so very, very important. Social and emotional learning helps students recognize and deal with emotions and form connections to others, and those skills can help prevent bullying. And that's why we are moving ahead, and we are seeking approval of a resolution designating October 2019, in fact, we've done it, National Bullying Prevention Month.
Senator, it's Bob Whelan. One of the things that I'm struck by and motivated me to get into education was the prospect of kids having a sense of agency and the impact that they can have in terms of making a positive difference in the world. What I've been struck by, you have a calendar that's wildly, almost inexplicably busy, and yet you chose to make the time for Charles to talk about something that's enormously important to me as an educator. When you reflect on that, and when you reflect on the power that kids have in terms of civic engagement, in terms of making a positive difference, what are some of the things that come to mind in terms of you making something like this a priority for you?
First, thank you for your understanding and, in fact, spreading enlightenment, no doubt, to parents as well as to students. And that kind of perspective and insight makes an enormous difference in education, more understood really more broadly. But, a lot of the great social movements in our nation's history have been led by young people. Think of the civil rights movement, where people at an early age decided they were going to sit in or lead marches. The anti-war protesters of the 70s who helped bring an end to the wars abroad were young people. The kinds of movement that we've seen recently on gun violence, again, March for Our Lives and other similar efforts at grassroots level, led by young people. And so the anti-bullying effort, I think very appropriately, has been led by young people like Charles. And when I think of that leadership, it's so enormously inspiring because it means that another generation is showing what it means in America to achieve social change and improve our nation. That's what has always improved our nation, expanded rights and persuaded fellow citizens about the importance of moving forward. And, it's just really inspiring to me.
Absolutely. And it's really been with your help that I've been able to expand this because you've been writing this resolution with me, you in your office, and you've been so great with the whole process. And we're really hoping to get this passed. And I think that Connecticut can lead the charge on unifying the country.
We're going to lead the charge, and it should be a bipartisan charge.
Of course.
There's nothing partisan about this issue. It ought to be bipartisan.
Yes, as we have you passing it in the Senate and Congressman Emmer passing it in the House. Congressman Emmer being a representative, a Republican representative from Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. Senator Blumenthal, talk to us about this resolution.
Well, the resolution is entitled Designating October 2019 as National Bullying Prevention Month and October 23rd, 2019 as Unity Day. And it begins with a very important fact. Whereas 1 in 5 students report being bullied and nearly 16% of students report being cyberbullied. That fact is riveting when you think of the prevalence and magnitude of this problem. And then it goes on to say, whereas students who experience bullying are at an increased risk for poor school adjustment, sleep difficulties, anxiety, and depression. Well, that kind of gives a human element to those abstract numbers. And then it says, whereas National Bullying Prevention Month was founded in 2006 by the National Bullying Prevention Center of the Pacer Center and has been held during the month of October each year since. And whereas National Bullying Prevention Month is a nationwide campaign that seeks to educate the public about and raise awareness of bullying prevention. And it goes on, but basically what it says is we're going to designate 2019 as National Bullying Prevention Month and October 23rd, 2019 as Unity Day to, quote, acknowledge that the prevention of bullying of children should be a national priority. And we acknowledge and state that Unity Day is often celebrated by wearing orange, the official color of Unity Day, holding student and teacher-led discussions at schools, organizing efforts at community centers, other activities that are done. So we're really trying to inform, which is why we talk about those statistics and the effect of bullying, but also to raise awareness and activism in this anti-bullying effort.
Yes. And of course, Unity Day takes the anti-bullying strong stance, but it also goes beyond and it talks about the different values of tolerance, kindness, and respect, and for everyone to come together despite their differences and despite their opinions. How do you feel about that, Senator?
Tolerance, respect, civility, we need a lot more of it. We have too little of it. And that kind of approach, I think, marks the best really in public discourse that we ought to emulate. Tolerance, respect, civility, kindness. We unfortunately in this country today lack a lot of the basic values in the way that we talk to each other and about each other. And just to be very blunt, there are too many bullies today in America in public life. There are too many bullying statements made. And this kind of resolution emphasizes the importance of talking to each other with kindness and respect and decency. So I think that that's another byproduct of this anti-bullying campaign, that it may help to change our public discourse.
Senator Richard Blumenthal joining us this morning on KTU Cares. A couple of more minutes left with the Senator.
So, Senator, one of the things that I'm struck by is when we can create a sense of belonging in schools, our potential in our communities to actually become the best versions of ourselves really becomes possible. Emotion is the on-off switch for learning. And when I think about us and our responsibility in terms of creating future civic leaders, it means an enormous amount to us to have leaders like Charles, and then to have that kind of partnership that we have with you through Charles's work. If you were to pass along a message for teachers, for our communities in an ever-evolving landscape where digital media has a very different impact, what would be some things you'd encourage us to be thinking about as we make our way forward?
I would encourage you to really support the kind of efforts that Charles really exemplifies, leadership, and it's leadership by example. He's not just telling other people what to do, he's leading by his own example. And that's the kind of leadership that I have always thought was most important. It has to be nurtured and supported and encouraged. So I would, for what it's worth, and it's probably not worth a whole lot, but as a parent of 4 children as well as a public official, I value tremendously the role that educators can play in that effort. And I include in that category of educators parents who work with educators. And I've really valued my partnership with Charles because I learn by listening. I spend a lot of time listening. I think it's one of the most important things I do. I listen and I read to learn about what's important to the people I represent. And I've listened a lot to Charles over these recent months since I've met him. And I think that what I've learned from him about bullying, about the horrific effects that bullying can have, and about the enormous potential that we all have to end it, has been very, very important to me. Mm-hmm. And so I thank him for that learning.
Yes, and I am so grateful to you for opening your arms and taking my cause head on and really believing in what I had to say, because you're such a busy man, and to give me the time to share my ideas, and not only share my ideas but earn your support, has been life-changing, and I will never forget that. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope we can continue to work together, because we have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely, yes.
Exactly. And with that in mind, Senator, any closing words? And again, it is absolutely an honor to have you spend some time this weekend with us on KTU Cares. Closing words from Senator Richard Blumenthal.
Let me just leave you with a thought that's in this resolution. 1 in 5 students report being bullied, and nearly 16% of students report being cyberbullied. You don't have to be a victim or a survivor. You don't have to be a parent who's affected. You don't have to be an educator who sees it to know the horrific effects that bullying can have on creating depression, preventing learning. I think Bob made the remark that emotion is the on and off switch for learning. Somebody who's really depressed and unhappy, hard to learn. Mm-hmm. And we all want students to learn, to prosper, to grow, because that's the strength of our community, the backbone of our community. So bullying is something we all have a stake in preventing, supporting anybody who's been a victim or survivor, and that's why I'm in this work, and I intend to continue it, and I hope others will join Charles in his leadership at Greens Farms Academy. I want to say a special thanks to WKTU. Mm-hmm. Thank you for really stepping forward to celebrate Unity Day. And as a parent, I want to thank David, Charles's father, for his great work and encouraging his son to really take the leadership here. So thanks very much for having me on.
Okay. And thank you once again, Senator Richard Blumenthal on KTU Cares. Charles, talk to us a little bit about the Unity Challenge.
Sure. So like every movement of today's era, everything has to have a challenge for people to participate in online and to go viral. So my Unity Day challenge would be pick one of the 3 themes of Unity Day, that being tolerance, kindness, respect. Again, that's tolerance, kindness, and respect. And talk. So you write that word on your hand, and you post a selfie of yourself with that word, and then you post a video on your social media or YouTube account talking about how you're going to incorporate that word into your life and what that means to you, and how everyone can work together in order to make that word possible.
Excellent. I love it. That is really great. Now, finally, Bob, I have one question for you. How can the students keep this up so that it's not just a once-a-year thing?
I think the biggest message that we've learned, thanks to Charles's leadership, is that students have voice. And for KTU listeners, for parents, for young people, that Charles had a choice several years ago in terms of how he wanted to approach things. He could have chosen the response of a victim, or it could have chosen the heroic approach that he took. Mm-hmm. And what we've been struck by is the radiating positive impact of that. So it's that voice, it's going to Charles's website. From there, our ability to continue to have this build each year through the really the flavor that kids give it themselves and make it authentic and unique, but most importantly, that it's advancing a positive student voice and messages of kindness, tolerance, and respect.
You know, we could talk about this for days because it's such an important topic, but we only have 30 seconds to a minute left for each one of you to talk about something that you haven't gotten in on the show this morning on KTU Cares. And first, we'll go to Charles Kolin. He's been talking to us about his story. He's a 16-year-old junior at Greens Farms Academy in Westport, Connecticut. Any closing words, Charles?
Sure. I think it's always important to come from a place of respect and come from a place of love when someone is being hateful towards you. And I think it's that love that you and that positive vibe that you reflect back on those people. I think that can change the way that they view the world. And I think by you giving back kindness, it's almost like the saying, killing them with kindness. And it'll create a much better environment for everyone. I have friends that have different opinions than me. I have friends that see the world different than me. But rather than argue with them and create hostility, I've found a way to live in harmony with them, and they've been some of the best friends I've made in my short 16 years of life. And I'm hoping that it doesn't stop there. And I know that if everyone embraces the cause and makes this important, it will become important, and it will explode and change the country positively.
Very well said. Bob Whelan, headmaster at Greens Farms Academy. Closing words this morning, Bob.
Dr. Viktor Frankl talked about this moment that exists between stimulus and response, and it's in that moment that our power and our potential for growth lies. And what inspires me to make a life in terms of serving young people is when kids like Charles actually take advantage of that moment and do something incredibly positive with it. So again, I would just invite people to, when they have that moment themselves, just pausing and thinking about the things that Charles has reminded us to do and following his lead.
So great. Bob, thanks for joining us this morning on KTU Cares. Great words also. Charles, let's wrap up with you. Any place that people can go to get, again, more information and your own website too?
Sure. So if you visit my website, it will have a link to contact my school. Anyone who's interested in helping us on the 23rd and beyond with Unity Day and other events, please use my link in my website. It'll direct straight to my school, and we would love to have you guys here.
And those sites again?
The site would be unitychallenge.org.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us on KTU Cares this morning. Anti-bullying, inclusion, respect, all great things that we're talking about this morning on the show. Thanks again to Fred Camilo, Connecticut State Representative, and Senator Richard Blumenthal, who also joined us this morning on KTU Cares.